It's been exactly as advertised. He was going to hit the ground running. He had 4 years of thinking about the possibility of getting back into this position. He made promises along the way. He was much more ready. He came roaring in. Sure, some of it is going to be off-putting because he is reactionary. He is explosive. He is unpredictable. Those were many of the reasons that people aligned with this president.
What you don't do is disappear somebody and then use deportation as a way to crack down on their speech rights. That is just a purely, I don't know how else to put it, but a purely authoritarian move whose intention is to chill any kind of pro-Palestinian advocacy that this administration opposes.
By preventing these situations from ever happening, we actually prevent the negative cascading consequences, and you reduce that incident, but you reduce further down line other retaliatory type crimes.
Those are some voices of people who've joined us on the Metro. I'm Tia Graham. Welcome back. The National Institute of Justice reports 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced domestic violence. To stop the violence, Michigan is expanding its work to assist the victims and families of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Lorna Elliot-Egan is the Director of Tribal Government Services and Policy at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. She told WDET's Nargis Rahman that the department hopes to increase awareness and resources for Indigenous communities.
2015 study indicated that Native American women were up 10 times more likely to be murdered or sexually assaulted than other women in America. And what we hear out of Native communities and from Native Americans is that cases are easily dropped. They're not investigated aggressively. And very often they will find that they're not getting the supports. They don't know how to go about looking for their relatives, or, what can they expect from a tribe? What can they expect from a state police officer? Or really, these are federal jurisdiction if it occurs on a reservation. Who do they go to get assistance with these cases? Tina will be able to assist, be a person that can help and has helped. She's worked as a victim's advocate in tribal and federal courtrooms. We're working with the Attorney General's office on their task force, which is a new development and a wonderful thing that's happening, to find a way to provide more information to the public. So first of all, they become more aware. Secondly, to really start to dig in and find a way to sort of centralize different types of data and update data, because the last set of data that we have from the CDC, I think, is from 2021. But the thing that we're doing the most is coming from a trauma-informed, victim-centered way of working with folks on these cases. And tribal communities are different from other communities. They're very protective of each other and insular. We want to try to find a way to assist them navigating through different systems when these things happen.
Do you know why there's such a higher rate of domestic violence among tribal communities? Or is it rather that this is just a reoccurring issue that people are not able to get help because of being a marginalized community in itself?
A lot of it, I think, actually comes from generational trauma, blood trauma, and the things that have occurred in the last 500 years of colonization to Native Americans in this country have not been pretty, do not support family structure. If your children are taken away, put in a boarding school, and they don't see a normal family, how do they know how to interact with a new spouse? How do they know to interact with their children if they've been beaten in a boarding school? And that's the way that their behaviors were responded to. Then how do they know to treat their own children, their spouses, when they're adult? Resources are not great for them. They haven't gotten a lot of support from government. Law enforcement may look at them and say, go talk to your tribal police. And tribal police go talk to the state police or the federal government. And so they're just kind of lost in the shuffle.
Do we know how many people are impacted in Michigan at this moment?
In MMIP cases, I believe the state of Michigan has over 4,000 cases that are open at this time in different jurisdictions.
Can you tell me what is the Michigan Domestic and Sexual Violence Prevention and Treatment Board, and what does it do?
So the DV Board is a group of experts in the area of domestic violence, and they work to support local governments, local programs, and advocate for the rights of people who are suffering from the impact of domestic violence in their homes. They do a lot of grant support, set policy.
What does this grant funding do to help victims or families of victims if they are impacted by domestic violence?
Well, it depends on the program. It's VOCA funding or VAWA, Violence Against Women and Crime Victims funding. And that comes from the feds. And we're kind of waiting right now to see if that's going to be impacted by what's happening in the US. Those programs in a tribal context will be different from program to program because each of the 12 tribal governments is its own standing government within the state of Michigan. And they have their own domestic violence programs, human services programs, health clinics, their own tribal police. Each one of those tribes is working sort of off of a federal template to create a murdered and missing Indigenous persons plan for when these things occur. But the funding that comes out of those grants will help support the programs that they do for domestic violence, for crime victims. We're looking for a program. There's a grant coming out related to housing for people who need to find new places to live with their families if they need to leave the home that they're in right now. So there's a number of grants that flow through us to the tribes. There's also some federal grants to go straight to the tribes too.
And is the Strong Hearts Native Helpline a part of this program, or is this a separate program? Is the Strong Hearts Native Helpline a part of this program, or is this a separate program?
That is a separate program. Strong Hearts is run by Native Americans for Native Americans. Funding from one of our grants does help support that through Uniting Three Fires Against Violence, I believe. That is an Upper Peninsula, but it serves the entire state, all the tribes in the state. And they do amazing work helping in the domestic violence and also in the MMIP area.
What if you're not part of one of the 12 tribes? Do you still have access to some of the resources that are available but are limited in the funding? How does that work?
That is true, that the funding is for tribal people. And you can be Native American, but not necessarily enroll in the tribe that you descend from. And each tribe is different. And that's one of the reasons that we have an advocate right here in this office, because Michigan has a large percentage of urban Indians living in the Metro Detroit area. And they're not necessarily connected to their tribal governments or close to them or getting services where they live from them. And additionally, there's 574 federally recognized tribes across the country, and many of those folks live in the Detroit area too. So one of the reasons we do have TINA is somebody needs guidance, somebody needs assistance. TINA looks at the U.S. as Turtle Island. That's what the Anishinaabe refer to this continent as. So she's going to help someone that reaches out to her for assistance, make proper referrals to the right places. Did you contact your tribe? Is your tribe helping you? Because tribes will, from a distance, give their citizens assistance if they need it. And then sort of put together a toolkit for individuals as to who do you contact, where do you go, what benefits are out there to help support you in your area. We don't want to turn people away, but our focus is on Indigenous peoples here from this continent. We recognize tribal sovereignty, but we also recognize that there are a number of Native Americans who are not necessarily attached to their tribes that might need the assistance. And so we'll provide what we
Can you elaborate a little bit on when you say that there's tribal services available and tribes are helping maybe individuals or their families if they're looking for a loved one? Can you elaborate on what kind of services are provided in these situations?
It really depends on the situation, to be honest with you. Where did the first of all, was there a crime? Where did it occur? A lot of times when people report a loved one missing, well, they're just a runaway. Well, not necessarily. Or they're off on a bender, not necessarily. But it's easy for people to say, sorry, just go wait and see what happens. Did the situation occur on tribal land? Michigan doesn't have large tribal reservations like they do out west. And so jurisdiction is always a question as far as who is responsible for investigating and then who prosecutes a case. Usually it would be the feds, or it would be tribal courts, probably not. It would be the feds, more than likely. State police, Michigan Attorney General's office, possibly. And that's what makes this so tricky and how things get lost in motion, because there's no clear, every case is different. And so the first thing we would say is, have you talked to your tribal government? Have they got anyone to support you, and what programs do they have? If they don't, Tina will be able to say, you live in this area, you can go here for this assistance. Do you have Medicaid? Do you need medical assistance? Do you need housing? Do you need food assistance? She'll be able to get people to sort of stop moving. If it's a case of I'm looking for somebody, she can give them some, the toolkit that she's developing to help them figure out what to do next. Who do I contact next? Just are hoping that we can create a space sort of as a clearinghouse almost of how do you respond when this happens? What's really important is educating the public that this is actually a thing and getting them to understand that tribal communities need supports to help navigate these kinds of things. Like, how do we fund assistance in cases where a tribe doesn't have the money at a time to launch a search party for somebody in their area? Or a citizen has been found in another state deceased and needs to be moved home. How do they fund that? We're looking at a couple of different things on the AG's task force. There's four work groups on that. One is education, other is advocacy, other is policy, and another is law enforcement. And so Tina and I are co-chairing the advocacy and the policy work groups. And so on the advocacy side, what supports do tribes need when one of these events occurs, and where can they get them, and do they have the money to respond? And on the policy side, where do we assist them to find the funding to do that if we are able to, because we know funding is going to be a challenge coming up in the next many years. It's just what laws are on the books that are helpful, what laws are on the books that are not helpful. What policies have other states taken on in order to address this problem that maybe Michigan could use as a model?
That was Lorna Elliot-Egan, Director of Tribal Government Services and Policy at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. She spoke with WDET's Nargis Rahman. The Metro's coverage of missing and murdered Indigenous people in Michigan will continue tomorrow when we sit down with a tribal leader. From the WDET newsroom, the Tigers beat the Red Sox 14-2 at Comerica Park yesterday. Gleyber Torres, Trey Sweeney, and Javier Baez each had 3 hits for Detroit, which scored 9 runs in the third inning. The team's record is now 27-15. That's the best in the American League, and the two teams play again tonight, weather permitting. Also from the WDET newsroom, Ford factory workers in Germany plan to strike tomorrow to protest job cuts. Reuters reports the automaker proposed to trim 14% of its European workforce. And Michigan now offers universal blood lead testing for children under 6 years, regardless of insurance status. The Care Coordination Section Manager for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services says that children with higher lead levels are eligible for in-home nursing, nutrition education, and other services. Coming up, the 13th congressional district race is heating up. We'll speak with former state senator Adam Ollier about why he's running. We'll be right back on the Metro. You all stay right there.